So you over-contributed to your Roth IRA and now you need to fix it. So I'm gonna go over some rules that you need to be aware of, and then I'm gonna go over 4 examples to help you figure out how to calculate it, including a link to a worksheet that's gonna make it a lot easier and a blog post that I'm gonna go through so you have all the tools and resources ready to fix this. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, or if this is your first time at our channel, welcome to the channel. My name is Travis Sickle, and let's go ahead and get right into it. So there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of. The method I'm gonna use in this video means and requires that you're doing this fix before you're filing your taxes, including extensions. Now, if you've already filed your taxes, but you haven't hit the October 15th deadline for your tax filing year, guess what? You could still do this fix. You can still do an amendment, and if you filed an extension, you can still fix it. Even if you didn't file an extension, you can still fix it just as long as you submitted your taxes on time. That is the only thing you need to do in order to complete this fix. So that is rule number 1 in order to even qualify to do this method, where we're going to take the money out of the Roth IRA, or you can recharacterize it over to the traditional IRA. Either way, the math that I'm gonna go through is gonna help you calculate so you know exactly how much you either need to take out or recharacterize. Now, the difference here is if you take the money out of the Roth IRA, the growth portion that's going to be attributable, also called the net income attributable, will be taxable as ordinary income. In addition, you're going to get a 10% penalty if you're under the age of 59 and a half. Now, if you recharacterize it, you can avoid all of that. So you're not going to have a penalty if you can qualify and do a recharacterization over to your traditional IRA. And if you've heard about the 6% excise tax penalty on the excess contribution, that is not going to apply in how we're going to do the calculation. That would only apply is if we didn't do this calculation and fix the excess Roth contribution before our October 15th deadline. Now, I say October 15th, it's usually October 15th, but if it falls on a weekend or a holiday, they just move that date around. But it's usually October 15th as long as you filed your taxes or filed an extension. And I'm going to say it one more time. If you already filed, you don't have to actually file your extension in order to qualify for this extension on this fix. So with your taxes, the automatic extension, you actually have to file something to get it. In this instance, you do not. But if you didn't file your taxes and you still have this fix and you're after the April 15th deadline, that's right, the April 15th deadline, then you're not going to qualify for this extension and you have to move on to a different way in order to fix it. But if you're in this window, then you can still watch this video and use this method. So before we go ahead and get started, let me go ahead and pull up some resources on the blog post to show you what you need. And you're gonna have it all in front of you, including the worksheet, which will help us work through these 4 examples that I'm about to go through. So here's my blog, and the post that I'm talking about is how to fix the excess Roth contributions. And if we just scroll down a little bit, you'll see I have a spot about the 6% penalty and how to avoid it. But here is what you need to know. You need to know the modified adjusted gross income for your Roth IRA to figure out what your excess contribution is. And this is where it's really gonna start. So once you figure out your modified adjusted gross income, and I have the worksheet right here, then you're just gonna scroll down to figure out what your phase out is. So this first one figures out what your income is, your modified adjusted gross income. Then you're gonna apply this to the phase out. Now, if you're below the phase out, and I have them right here, the Roth IRA income limits, these are modified adjusted gross incomes. But if you're single for 2021 and you earn under 125,000, you're not gonna have this issue. Although you could still have an excess contribution, you could still make the full $6,000 contribution. But you can see the phase out goes up to 140,000 for singles. So if you're right in the middle of this, then you're gonna wanna use this worksheet on the phase out to figure out how much you would qualify for and which part was your excess contribution. So if we scroll down even further, you're gonna see this links to downloading the worksheet. And that is what I'm gonna go through. But if you also like to read about it, you can go to this blog post and I go step by step on all the different sections on how to fill out this worksheet. So let's go ahead and bring up the worksheet and let's go through our first example. So the first example that I'm going to go through, and I'll go ahead and pull it up right on the screen for you. I find that this is the best way to do it just because there's so many different nuances. So I chose 4 examples, or I drew out 4 examples to hopefully make this a little bit easier so you can follow along. So let's say that on January 1st of 2021, you had a Roth IRA that had $500 in it and there was no growth. So let's say we had no growth until February 1st, 2021, no growth, and we made it a contribution of $500. Now this is our first contribution. This was already previously contributed in prior years. So it's $500, and then we contributed $500, bringing our total to $1,000. Now we had some growth in my example, and it grew to $2,000 on 4/1/2021. And then we had a rollover contribution of $4,000 on 5/1. And then, so that means we had $6,000. So our 2,000 plus our 4 was our 6. And then our 6,000 by January 15th grew to 8,000. So let's go ahead and take a look at the worksheet here, and we can see the excess contribution. Now these are the numbers that we need to understand here. So the excess contribution here is going to be the full amount. We're just going to assume that we didn't qualify for anything. So that means it's $500. And let me bring up this really quickly so you can see it. $500 was our only contribution. This is a rollover contribution. This was our only contribution into the Roth IRA. So this means that we're going to put in our excess of $500. Now, if we look at our numbers here, we can see that $8,000 was on January 15th, 2022, but it is the date that we're going to remove it. So that's what we want to take a look at. This is actually the closing balance is what you should be using of yesterday. So after 4 o'clock is when you want to run this math, and you're going to look to what the closing price was of all the positions, add up all of the positions, including the cash in that single Roth IRA that you have the excess. And that is what you need to look at. You need to look at the Roth IRA that has the excess contribution. If you have 3 or 4 Roth IRAs, you're not going to aggregate them. You're not going to look at all of them across the board, just the ones that you made the excess contributions to. So if you have one that you made the excess contribution to, that's the one that you're going to have to pull it from. You can't pull it from another Roth IRA or even bother with the math on the other Roth IRAs because they're not included in this calculation. It is only for the Roth IRA that you made the excess contribution to. So moving on to the next step, in 2, amount of any withdrawals, we didn't make any of those. Account balance immediately before the excess was made was $500. And we could see that again right here, that we started with 500, contributed 500, there was no growth. So this is the balance right before our excess was made. So that means on number 4, the amount of the excess contribution and all subsequent contributions made before the excess removal. So that is going to be $4,500. The reason it's going to be $4,500 is because our excess was $500, but we also had a rollover contribution of $4,000. Now this wasn't an excess, it was a rollover contribution, but the amount that we have to add up includes the contributions and all subsequent contributions. So $500 was our excess. What came after it is $4,000. That's what we need to calculate. So that's where we're getting $4,500. Now for number 5, any time deposit penalties that will be applied due to the excess removal, that is going to be 0. It's likely to be 0. Those are any penalties that you might have associated with things like a CD or an annuity, or basically those are the only 2 that come to mind. If you have any charges for liquidating your assets in order to take them out of the Roth IRA, that's what would be included on any time deposit penalties. But for most people, they're probably not going to have that. So just put 0. In almost every example I run or anything I encounter with an excess contribution, it's always 0. So that's what we're going to put there. So if we scroll down, we can see the math right here on the formula. And our excess contribution was $500, and our total earnings was $3,000. Our adjusted opening balance, so our opening balance was $500, but our adjusted opening balance, and you can see the definition right here, the balance of the account immediately before the excess contribution plus the excess contribution and all subsequent contributions. So we're basically taking that $4,000, the $500, and adding it to the original $500, and that's where we're getting $5,000 from. So doing this math, our net income attributable is $300. So we need to take out the excess plus our net income attributable, which is $800. So that was example number 1. Now we're gonna go through example number 2, and let me go ahead and pull it up on the screen for you. So on January 1st, 2021, I'm keeping that number the same, $500. It also did not grow. So on February 1st, 2021, we made an additional contribution, $500, total balance $1,000, same math. This is growing to $2,000. And then we're realizing our mistake on January 10th, 2022, but we had another $1,000 in growth. So let's go ahead and walk through this on the screen. Let me go ahead and zero out some of these numbers, and we can go ahead and plug what we want in. I would suggest if you're going through this that you zero out all of the numbers just to start fresh so you don't make any mistakes. Our excess contribution amount. So our excess contribution, we only made one contribution of $500, so it's going to be $500. So we'll put $500 in there. Our balance as of the date of withdrawal. So the balance as of the date of withdrawal is $3,000 because we're going to say this is what the balance was on yesterday's close, and then we're going to fix it the following day. So that's going to be $3,000. So we'll put in $3,000, and then the amount of any withdrawals, we have none. Account balance immediately before the excess was made. Immediately before was still our $500 right before, and then the amount of the excess contribution and all subsequent contributions made before the excess removal. Now, we didn't have any other contributions, no rollovers, no additional contributions. So we're going to put in $500. And then any time deposits we'll put as 0. And there you go with our math again. So we had $500 for the excess contribution, and $2,000 was our total earnings, and $1,000 was our adjusted opening balance. So just one more time, $500 plus you're taking all of the excess contributions and all subsequent contributions and adding it as our opening balance right back there on our $500. So that's where we're getting that math from. And then we have a total net income attributable after we're doing all this math of $1,000, and total amount to be withdrawn, $1,500. Why? Excess was $500, but our net income attributable was $1,000. So I think the point I wanted to make here was, in drawing out this example, was that even if there's growth after 12/31 of the taxable year, it still is going to be attributable until you fix it. So you need to make sure that you're fixing it before your tax filing deadlines, including extensions. So that is why I wanted to point out that example. So now let's go to example number 3. And this one's going to be a little bit more involved. So kind of get those wheels turning for more real world examples. Sometimes these are hard to draw out, but let's go ahead and go through this one because this one has a lot more moving parts than the previous two, kind of warming you up. Hopefully your situation isn't super complicated, but if you need to figure this out, I know going through a lot of examples helps. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Now, I'm going to draw it out 2 different ways because this is a little bit more complicated. So $500 per month, always on the 15th. So we're going to make 12 contributions of $500, bringing it to $6,000 for the year. Our opening balance was $1,000 on January 1st, 2021. November to December, our excess was $1,000. What I'm saying here is that all through the year, we were eligible for those contributions, but when we did our calculations, we actually over-contributed by $1,000. So our November and our December contributions were in excess, and all of the previous ones, they're okay. They're okay to be in there. They're not in excess. So we were eligible to contribute $5,000, and the additional $1,000 was in excess. But we are always making these contributions on the 15th of every month. Now, November 14th, our balance was $7,000. Why am I using the 14th? Why? Because it's right before our 15th contribution in November. And we're going to fix this on March 2nd of the following year. So I'll put in 2022 in there, throw that in there for you. and our ending balance was $13,000. So before we go to the worksheet, let me go ahead and pull this up on a little bit different way of looking at it. And I tried to draw out a timeline here, so hopefully this makes sense. We started with $1,000. We make January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, and November. So our November 11/14 was $7,000. Then we're going to make our 500. These two were in excess. And then we have January and February of 2022. Our balance right before we're going to fix this is $13,000. So let's go ahead and plug some of these numbers in here. So first, let's go ahead and zero these out so we can get through this. Zero these out. And where we go, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Our excess contribution was $1,000. Could be as November and December. So that's 500 each, $1,000. Balance as of the date of withdrawal, that's going to be our $13,000, which is the balance on March, what did I say before? March 2nd. So the March 2nd is the balance that we're going to look at, or March 1st is what we're going to look at. We're fixing this on March 2nd. Same thing. It's our closing balance or date of withdrawal, right before our date of withdrawal. Amount of any withdrawals, we don't have any withdrawals. Account balance immediately before the excess was made. So that's going to be our $7,000. And we're saying that was on 11/14, following day. We make our $500 excess contribution. And then the amount of the excess contribution and all subsequent contributions made before the excess removal. Now, let me bring this up on the screen again. So we made this contribution, which was our first excess, and we're fixing it on March 2nd. So we have to include 500, 500, and also 500 and another 500 because it's right before we're going to fix it. I'm certain that somebody's going to get tripped up and think that this is not included when in fact it is. So it's going to be $2,000. So the amount of the excess contribution and all subsequent contributions made before the excess removal. So that's going to be $2,000. Any time deposits are going to be zero. So we have our $7,000 and our $2,000. And our adjusted opening balance now is $9,000. So the big difference here is that our excess contribution was $1,000, but our total contributions were $2,000. And sometimes when you're looking at this, you might think, well, how are these numbers different? Because you can't possibly make a contribution that isn't in excess after your first contribution, but you can if it's made in the following year, like in this example, or in the previous example that we talked about, if we had a rollover contribution. So either one of those types of contributions will not be in excess. So it's 1,000 here, 2,000 there, and this makes our math excess contribution total 1,000, which is 1,000 from here, and then our total earnings was 4,000. That's our total gain, and we have to figure out how much of this gain was attributable to the $1,000. So our adjusted opening balance, which adds everything to, so it's going to add all of those contributions to our opening balance. So 7,000 plus our 2,000, that's where we're getting the 9,000. So it's this 7,000 here, this 2,000 here, that equals our 9,000. And that gives us a net income attributable of $440.44, bringing the total amount to be withdrawn at $1,444.44. So we do have one more example, especially if you're trying to figure out how do these rollovers or non-excess contributions actually affect the calculation, because they do. So let's go ahead and go through an example to show you what that looks like. So if you think there's a strategy, there actually might be. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. 12/31/2020, $500. I could have put January 1st. It doesn't matter. $500. January 1st. Oh, there you go. I put January 1st here. The following day, we make our contribution of $500. Basically the same example we've been running through. We have $1,000 in this account. That $1,000 turns into $2,000. On 12/31, we're going to make another contribution of $500, bringing the total to $2,500. We immediately realized we made a mistake on January 1st of 2022, and we are going to get to work and we are going to fix this. So here's what I want to point out. we have to figure out what the net income attributable is. But here's what's interesting. The net income attributable, you would assume, is associated with the actual investment. Whether or not it is in cash, it is irrelevant. Think about that. If you made the contribution, let's say we made that first contribution and we left it in cash, and all the growth from what you're looking at your statements was attributable to the positions that you bought before you ever made the excess contribution. It doesn't matter. It's all, if it's in this single IRA, it's commingled. That means it's all mixed up. So it does not matter if you made the contribution and left it in cash, or you invested it, or you had cash and you invested the $500 that you put in there. It doesn't matter. It's commingled. So all of the gains will be attributable to either the excess or your existing balance. So that's basically the way that this is going to work. So that's what I want to point out here. And you're going to notice that last contribution had no growth realistically associated with it. So you might be wondering, how is this math calculated? So let's go through it. So the excess contribution amount here is going to be $1,000. $1,000 because we didn't qualify for anything in this example. So we made two contributions and they were both in excess, so $1,000. Balance as of the date of withdrawal. So the date of withdrawal is going to be $2,500. Amount of any withdrawals, we didn't do any withdrawals in any of these examples. And number three, the account balance immediately before the excess was made is still our $500 because we had $500, there was no growth, we made the contribution, $500, and so it's $500. So the amount of the excess contribution and all subsequent contributions before the excess removal. In that case, it's going to be $1,000 because we didn't have any rollovers or any other contributions except the excess contributions, which there were two. So now let's take a look at some of this math. Our adjusted opening balance is $1,500. You start with $500 and then you add your two contributions, gives you $1,500. We go down here and we see an excess contribution of $1,000 because we made two contributions, $1,000 in total earnings. Our adjusted opening balance, divide all that by 1,500. We get net income attributable of $660.67. Amount to be withdrawn, $1,666.67. Now here is what is interesting about this example is the fact that that last $500 didn't do anything for you. So it was just contributed at the very last second. There was no growth. But as you're doing this calculation, you're going to realize by making that contribution, it gets tacked on to that opening balance, which then has a greater amount that gets attributable to that excess contribution. So the excess contributions will take on more weight. Said another way, if we never made that contribution, then only $500 of the gains would have been associated with the excess contribution. But because we made that last $500 contribution and it was in excess, that means more is going to be attributable because in that instance, we see that our net income attributable here is $666.67 rather than $500, which might be the more logical way of looking at this. That would be $500, but it's not. It's $667 if you're rounding. And then you're going to add that to the total excess contribution. So hopefully these examples have helped, and use the blog post, use the worksheet, go slow. Do it possibly on a weekend to make your life a little bit easier. And if you have any questions, comments, let me know in the comments down below. Check out the blog post. I'll leave that in the description at the bottom as well. And if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and leave your comments down at the bottom.